The night began quietly, almost like any other, but something in the air felt unsettled, as if the city itself was holding its breath, waiting for a moment to arrive. In Boston, autumn had settled in, painting the streets with wet leaves and soft yellow lights, and Ethan Walker stood alone in his apartment, staring out the window at the moving traffic below, feeling the familiar mix of restlessness and tired calm that followed him most evenings. He was 34, responsible, stable, and respected at work, yet none of that filled the quiet space inside him that had grown since his relationship ended 2 years ago, not in anger or drama, but in silence, which somehow hurt more. He had learned how to live with routine, how to convince himself that being alone was easier than risking disappointment again, and tonight he almost chose that safety once more. His phone buzzed with a reminder about a small charity gathering downtown, an event he had agreed to attend out of politeness rather than interest, and for several minutes he debated ignoring it, telling himself he was too tired, too busy, too content staying home. But something pushed him to move, maybe boredom, maybe loneliness, maybe the quiet hope that life could still surprise him. He put on his coat, stepped into the cold air, and let the city pull him forward without knowing why. Across town, Claire Reynolds stood in her sister's bathroom, adjusting her hair with hands that felt heavier than they should, her reflection showing a woman who looked composed but carried old cracks beneath the surface. At 32, Claire had returned to Boston after leaving Chicago behind, along with a broken engagement that had forced her to question her choices, her instincts, and her belief in lasting love. She told people the move was about work and family, but deep down it was about healing, about finding herself again after building a future around someone who slowly drifted away. She hadn't planned to attend the charity event either, but her sister insisted, saying it would be good for her to go out, to meet people, to stop hiding behind work. Claire agreed reluctantly, promising herself she would stay for only a short time, smile politely, and leave before the noise and expectations became too much. When she arrived at the venue, the warmth and chatter washed over her, making her feel both present and distant at the same time, as if she were watching life happen through glass. Ethan entered moments later, scanning the room with mild discomfort, noticing clusters of confident conversations and easy laughter, feeling like an observer rather than a participant, until fate, quiet and unannounced, stepped in. Near the refreshment table, he turned too quickly, and Claire, distracted by her own thoughts, stepped forward at the same moment, causing them to nearly collide. They stopped short, eyes meeting in surprise, and for a brief second the world narrowed to that shared space. There was no dramatic spark, no instant understanding, just a stillness that felt different from everything else around them. Claire apologized softly, Ethan answered with the same courtesy, and they shared a small, human smile that carried no expectations, yet lingered longer than it needed to. They moved apart, blending back into the room, but the moment followed them, tugging gently at their attention, making each glance across the space feel intentional rather than accidental. Ethan noticed Claire's calm presence, the way she listened more than she spoke, the thoughtful expression that crossed her face as she observed the room, while Claire noticed Ethan's quiet nature, his lack of performance, the sense that he wasn't trying to impress anyone. Neither planned to speak again, yet as the night unfolded, chance placed them near each other once more, this time by the balcony doors, where the noise softened and the city lights stretched endlessly below. Ethan broke the silence with an honest, slightly awkward comment about the event, and Claire responded with humor that surprised even herself. And just like that, conversation replaced hesitation. They spoke easily, without rehearsed lines, about simple things like work, city life, and how autumn always made everything feel temporary and reflective, and as the minutes passed, they began sharing pieces of themselves they usually kept guarded. Ethan talked about his job and how he once believed planning cities meant he could plan life too, only to learn that people and feelings never follow blueprints, while Claire spoke about her return to Boston, carefully avoiding details yet allowing the weight of her past to show in her voice. They listened to each other with rare attention, not trying to fix or impress, just understanding, and that mutual respect created a comfort neither expected to find. Time moved quickly, unnoticed, until the event started to wind down and people began saying their goodbyes, and suddenly the idea of leaving felt heavier than it should. When Ethan suggested meeting again for coffee, not out of confidence but quiet sincerity, Claire hesitated only briefly before agreeing, surprising herself with how natural the answer felt. They exchanged numbers, their fingers brushing lightly, a small moment that carried more meaning than either wanted to admit, and when they finally stepped out into the cold night, walking in opposite directions, both felt the strange certainty that something important had begun without asking permission. Ethan walked home replaying the evening in his mind, telling himself not to overthink it, yet knowing deep down that this night had already shifted something inside him, while Claire, riding home through glowing streets, pressed her lips together in a thoughtful smile, aware that for the first time in a long while, her heart felt open rather than guarded, and neither of them knew that this simple meeting, born from hesitation and chance, was the quiet start of a night that would change everything. Ethan stepped onto the balcony to escape the noise inside, expecting only cold air and a few quiet minutes, but instead he found Claire standing near the railing, looking out at the city as if she were searching for answers in the distant lights, and something about her calm presence made him speak before doubt could stop him. He made a simple comment about the view, and she answered with an easy smile, and that small exchange opened a door neither had planned to walk through. Their conversation moved quickly, not rushed but flowing naturally, as if they were picking up a discussion paused long ago, and soon they were sharing stories about work, daily routines, and the strange comfort of familiar cities that still felt new. Ethan spoke about his job in urban planning, how he liked shaping spaces for people even though his own life felt loosely arranged, and Claire talked about designing homes, explaining how she believed rooms should feel safe and honest, a reflection of the people who lived in them. As the night deepened, their words grew more personal without becoming heavy, and they spoke about moving on, about how starting over could feel both freeing and lonely, and about the quiet fear of repeating old mistakes. Claire admitted she had returned to Boston to feel grounded again, while Ethan shared how he had stayed because leaving felt like running, and in those honest moments, trust formed without effort. The noise from inside faded into the background, replaced by the rhythm of their voices and the soft hum of the city, and time passed unnoticed until laughter from the room reminded them they were not alone. Even then, neither rushed to leave, lingering in the space they had created, aware that it was rare to feel this understood by someone new. When the event began to end and people gathered their coats, Claire sighed lightly, admitting she hadn't expected the evening to turn out this way, and Ethan agreed, surprised by how disappointed he felt that it was ending. He hesitated before asking if she would like to meet again, not wanting to push, but Claire answered with a calm yes that felt certain rather than impulsive. They exchanged numbers, their smiles warm but careful, and walked back inside together, now aware of each other's presence in a way that felt natural. Outside, the cold air wrapped around them as they stood near the entrance, neither wanting to say goodbye too quickly, and they spoke about meeting for coffee, choosing a simple plan that carried quiet promise. When they finally parted, Claire walked away with a thoughtful expression, replaying the night in her mind, while Ethan stood still for a moment, watching her disappear into the street, feeling something shift inside him. As they moved back into their separate lives, both carried the same unspoken question, wondering if this connection was just a pleasant moment or the beginning of something deeper, and as the city lights flickered around them, they knew that the night had already changed how they felt about tomorrow. Even if they did not yet understand what came next, the days after that night moved quickly, yet every hour seemed to carry a quiet echo of what had begun, and Ethan found himself checking his phone more often than he wanted to admit, rereading Claire's short messages that were simple but thoughtful, each one making his ordinary routines feel lighter. Their first coffee meeting happened sooner than expected, easy and natural, with no awkward pauses. Just steady conversation that flowed as they walked through a small cafe near the river, talking about favorite places in the city, small childhood memories, and the strange feeling of meeting someone at the wrong time yet feeling it might be the right one. From there, meetings became part of their week, not planned far ahead, but welcomed when they happened, turning into quiet dinners, long walks through neighborhoods filled with history, and moments of silence that felt comfortable rather than empty. Claire felt herself opening in ways she thought were no longer possible, laughing without forcing it, sharing ideas and dreams she had kept hidden since her engagement ended, while Ethan felt his guarded habits soften as he allowed himself to hope without making promises he wasn't sure he could keep. They talked openly about their pasts, not in detail, but enough to understand the scars each carried, and instead of pushing those memories away, they respected them, knowing that healing was not a straight line. One evening, sitting on a park bench as the sky faded into deep blue, Claire asked quietly if Ethan ever feared getting close again, and he answered honestly that he feared losing himself more than losing someone else, a truth that surprised him as much as it moved her. Claire admitted she was afraid of giving her heart fully and being left behind once more, and Ethan listened without trying to fix her feelings, which made her feel seen rather than judged. With every shared moment, the connection grew deeper, yet neither rushed to define it, sensing that naming it too quickly might break the fragile balance they had built. Still, uncertainty lingered beneath the warmth, and sometimes Claire lay awake at night wondering if this was just a passing chapter meant to teach her something before she moved on again, while Ethan questioned whether he was ready to offer more than companionship and care. Their closeness brought comfort, but also raised quiet questions about the future, questions neither wanted to face too soon. One evening, after a long walk through streets glowing with early winter lights, Claire paused and asked what would happen if life pulled them in different directions, and Ethan replied that some moments mattered even if they didn't last forever, words that felt honest but also carried a distance she could not ignore. She nodded, understanding his meaning, yet feeling a small ache form in her chest, realizing that opening her heart again meant accepting the risk of loss. As they hugged goodbye that night, the embrace lasted longer than before, filled with unspoken emotion, and as Claire walked home, she wondered if this connection was leading them forward together or simply preparing them for another goodbye. Ethan, watching her leave, felt the same weight settle in his chest, knowing that whatever happened next, this chapter had already changed him, and as the city continued its restless movement around them, both sensed that the night they met was no longer just a memory, but a turning point they could not undo. The change came suddenly, the way real life often does, when Claire received an email one quiet morning that made her sit still for a long time, reading the words again and again as her heart raced, because the design firm she admired had offered her a major project in Seattle, a chance to grow, to lead, to finally step into the future she once imagined for herself. The offer felt earned and frightening at the same time, because accepting it would mean leaving Boston, leaving familiarity, and leaving Ethan, who had become part of her days in a way she never expected. She spent hours walking through the city, past places that now carried meaning, trying to understand what she truly wanted, knowing that turning down the offer might lead to regret, but accepting it might mean losing something just as important. When she finally asked Ethan to meet her, her voice was steady, but her hands trembled, and they sat together in the cafe where they had shared so many quiet moments, the space now filled with a tension that felt heavier than silence. Claire told him about the offer honestly, without drama, explaining what it meant for her career and her sense of self, and Ethan listened closely, his expression calm even as the weight of her words settled inside him. He didn't interrupt, didn't argue, didn't ask her to stay, and that alone made Claire's eyes burn, because she realized he cared enough to respect her dreams even if they pulled her away. Ethan told her that she deserved growth and opportunity, that he never wanted to be the reason someone held back, even though the idea of her leaving left a quiet ache in his chest. They walked outside together, the city moving around them as it always had, and spoke about uncertainty, about how timing often decided things before people were ready, and about how meeting someone could change you even if the path didn't stay shared forever. Claire admitted she wished life were simpler, that love and ambition didn't have to stand on opposite sides, and Ethan replied that sometimes the bravest choice was not holding on, but letting someone become who they were meant to be. At the corner where they first said goodbye weeks ago, they stopped again, both aware of how much had changed since that night, and Claire leaned her forehead against his, breathing in the comfort of a moment she wanted to remember clearly. She told him that meeting him had reminded her she could trust her heart again, and Ethan told her that she had shown him that opening up was not weakness, but courage. They didn't promise to wait or pretend distance would be easy, because honesty mattered more than hope built on uncertainty, and when they finally embraced, it was gentle, full of respect, and heavy with emotion, a goodbye that carried gratitude rather than regret. Claire walked away with tears in her eyes but strength in her steps, knowing she was choosing growth without denying what the connection had meant, while Ethan stood watching until she disappeared, feeling sadness but also clarity, understanding that some people come into your life not to stay forever, but to change how you see yourself and the world. In the weeks that followed, life moved forward. Claire preparing for her new chapter, Ethan returning to his routines with a quieter but fuller heart, both carrying the memory of one night that had shifted their direction. They did not forget each other, but they did not cling to the past either, because what they shared had already done its work, reminding them that love did not always need permanence to be real, and that sometimes the most meaningful stories were not about staying, but about becoming.